And you just need to be aware that if you are picked up for audit, they're not pretty. They go through everything.
G'day, Paul from Small Crown Productions here, and welcome to the Business of Art. On this channel, I dig into all of the things that we need to help us build a business around our creative work. So tips, tools, strategies, interviews, mindset, whatever I can do to help share knowledge from people who know what they're talking about so that we can do business better and make money from our creative work. So if that is something you are interested in, please consider subscribing. This video is one in a series of over 15 videos relating to tax and finance for creative people in Australia. So this is specific to Australia. It is also general advice. Always, always, always seek specific advice about your situation in your region or country where you are. What I did was ask my creative network for a question that they would love to ask a tax and finance specialist, and then I bundled them all up and took them to Matt Tucker, the principal of Creative Crunches here in Brisbane. Creative Crunches is an arts-focused accountancy firm. They know what they're talking about when it comes to Australian tax law, tax and finance for creative people. But again, general advice. Always seek specific advice to your situation. Matt was super generous to donate his time. I cannot thank him enough for taking the time out of his day to actually sit and answer these questions for us all. So with that, let's dive in to today's question.
What triggers an audit? What happens if you are audited? And how likely is it to happen?
One of the biggest triggers is still someone dobbing you in for doing the wrong thing. So for anyone deliberately doing the wrong thing, don't publicise it. But the ATO's data matching systems are getting more and more sophisticated every year. We're starting to see more warnings come up on ATO portal reports for people. So if you're lodging tax returns with pretty large claims, more than the norm, that's going to raise some suspicions. Now, it might just be some questions that they ask, but it may not trigger a full-blown desk audit, but it could. They've got an ever-increasing set of industry benchmarks. So when you throw a tax return in, wages and salaries, you're putting through what an occupation code is. In your business, you're throwing through what industry you're part of. They've got that data on everyone in that occupational and business code. So they get an idea for how much people are paying in commercial rent as opposed to their turnover levels. They've got an idea of what contracting fee levels are generally across broad statistics. Yeah. In the work-related expenses space, they have an idea of what the average type of travel claim or car usage is. So if you're putting in a tax return where those claims are well beyond what most people are doing, you're going to stick out. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a desk audit. So we've got a lot of clients who are in the film and TV space where their level of expense claims against what they do, especially if they're working freelance, like they are sort of freelance, but every time they work on a production, it's payroll here and it's payroll there and it's payroll here, then the tax office just looks at them as being, oh, you work in film and you have wage and salary income. That's all very generic, but most people might have one employer through the year, maybe a couple. Sometimes we've got film and TV people with like 15 different jobs through the year. And all of those have got various expenses. Some are running makeup kits and all sorts of things. Some have got lots of travel in association with the work that they're doing. So the claims can be high. Now we might get a statement across one of those clients that say, look, based on last year, we think those claims are pretty high. It's not to say they're illegitimate claims, but they're just saying, look, we're aware of it. Mm-hmm. We'll be looking at this next tax return. But it's interesting because we've also had cases where we have a conversation with the client about that so that they're just aware. It's almost a bit of a shot across the bow to them as well, because we're not auditing you. There's some extent to which we have to rely on the accuracy of what you're telling us. The stuff that we think is really super contentious, we would probably knock out and say it's best that you don't. But there are other things where we will research something and say, well, look, we can't find anything to say it's not claimable. Sometimes you actually dig quite deep and you find a yes. There's almost like this idea that it's no, or you would think it's no, but if you research deep enough, you actually do find that that the answer to these people is yes. And so you do put the claims in, although always with that that piece of advice, make sure you've got the receipts for this, because if you don't have the receipts and it's tested, you're gone. So on the back of those conversations, we sometimes get back from the clients like, I've got no problem with those claims. I've kept all the receipts. I've done exactly as you've told me. And I've got all these claims again because this is what I do. So, well, in that case, we put the claims in again. Just be aware that if we do this a second time, it could trigger an audit. And you just need to be aware that if you are picked up for audit, they're not pretty. They go through everything because they can. And all of this legislation is on their side for what they require from you. So if you can't prove it, you're gone. And the other thing too is that if you can't prove it, if they get this idea that you've been reckless in the preparation of your return, they won't just deny the claim and make you repay the tax. They'll put a penalty on it, which is the value of the tax and some. So it might be you've overclaimed and you need to pay $1,500 worth of tax, but they might put a 50% penalty for recklessness on that. Wow. So now you have to pay them $3,000 for the trouble. Was it really worth doing all that? And maybe now they're going to go back and audit the prior year as well, because they're probably going to get a result on that as well. So it can be a really bad experience. If all the records are there though, completely different story. It's probably still unpleasant going through it, but there's all the stuff. Anything you want to ask me, go for it. Tick, 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 audit complete. So we've had cases where all of those claims have gone through again, and we would maybe expect that activity to happen. Nothing. Maybe that's like a bluff. I don't know what's happening, but even I would expect that to be a phone call or something tested, but it hasn't. So maybe they even think, well, the person's with an agent, they've lodged these claims, it's actually quite similar the next year. What do we do here? Because maybe, just maybe, we could spend all the resources auditing this person and the claims are actually fine and we're going to completely waste our time, which they would. So we've seen instances like that happen too. So it's really hard to even advise a client, like, where is the true risk? It's hard to know. We've definitely gone through audits with clients, and I can say that the audits are thorough. Yeah. That's for sure, and that's why we always bang on that this record keeping requirement is real if you get audited. Now, if there's nothing particular in terms of the level of claims, nothing's really looking too suspicious, there's a really high chance that you will not have an audit, probably ever. The chances are still very, very slim, unless there's some sort of signpost to them for them to warrant maybe having a go.
There we go. Thanks again to Matt Tucker from Creative Crunches for taking the time to answer these questions. If you have a tax and finance question of your own that you would like to ask, please pop it in the comments below and I will do everything I can to get that answered, or link you to one of the other videos where it may already have been asked and answered. Also in the description below is a link to the playlist that contains all of these tax and finance questions, so you can dig through there and see if your question has already been answered. And of course, it would be fantastic if you could like this video, subscribe to the channel, but most importantly, if you got something of value out of this, there is a good chance you will know somebody else who can as well. Please share it with them, tag them in the comments, whatever you've got to do, pay it forward so that we can keep helping each other out. Thanks very much. I'll see you on the next one.